Greetings, Internet. This is Nick from Not Robot, and today we are going to talk about Wavecrash in its alpha form. So first, let me introduce the rest of the team here. You've already met the first couple of them, but I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hey, I'm Derek, and I'm happy to be here again. I work on programming.
And I'm Ryan. I'm a programmer.
Hey, I'm Corey. I'm happy to be here, and I'm an artist at Not Robot.
Yeah, so first things first, you might have noticed that Corey wasn't a part of the prototype. At this point of the project is when we first actually started needing art assets, and it's when we brought him in to start working with us. So let's have him introduce himself and talk about how he came into the project.
I initially came into the project around the time, the alpha? When I was asked, I was actually quite excited to join. I've been kind of looking for a project to do on the side. When Nick came to me, this one seemed to have substantially more organization and more promise, I guess you would say, than a lot of the other projects that some of my friends were working on and so on. Given the option, I definitely chose to join the crew and start working on some artwork for the alpha.
Yeah, Corey is the one who took our game from stick figure art into looking like a game.
Corey, when you first saw the prototype, the black background, the orange box flying around the screen, what were your original thoughts?
I was pretty psyched about it. It was nice to see there was working physics and progress in general. I had been on a couple of projects beforehand that kind of were really strong during the design phase and then kind of fizzled out when it actually came time to pull through and start actually working on things. So it was really nice to see that you guys had already had a functioning product already. So I just got the chance to pretty it up.
Make it pop.
Make it pop.
Make it pop.
So as we kind of stated before, we are going to spend some time today talking about the alpha build of Wavecrash. So the first thing we're going to mention is kind of our alpha goals, what we were trying to do with this build or at this milestone. We're going to talk about basically what Wavecrash looked like at this stage and kind of how we responded to where it was. We're going to talk about some of the initial art decisions that we made at this point in time, talk about some of the technical decisions, and then talk about how showing off this milestone, this build to family and friends went, and some of the mistakes we made and some of the successes we had. All right, so the goals of our alpha build were basically to get the game to a state where the core loop was finished so we could start expanding on it feature by feature. So in our prototype, we kind of had a proof of concept. We made sure that the core mechanics were fun, but we didn't really spend a whole lot of time honing in those core mechanics. So we had some random wonky map generator that was a lot of fun, but not exactly working as intended. We had a vehicle that was probably a little too fast and spun at a pace that was nigh uncontrollable. There were a lot of little issues that weren't really working perfectly, but they were simply working in the prototype. So for the alpha build, we wanted to make sure those were all honed in and working as close as possible to the actual implementation was intended to be. So behind you might notice that we are playing the Wavecrash alpha build. Some of the initial things you'll notice is that we have sound now. We have music, which was, I think at this time, free creative license, I think. Please don't sue us if you own that music. We used it for like 10 days. And we also had...
Yeah, you'll also see that there's checkpoints, which in this part of the game are represented by gas tanks. And this is something you'll probably run into if you're making a game where you'll think you have a specific mechanic in mind, but how you theme it, how it goes, depends on the game. And so in the future, you'll notice we kind of turn this into a timer versus a gas tank, which is what you see. We also added coins at this point, and we're doing a little bit more complicated map generation. All right, so we balanced out the map generation a little more so that it looks like the game will be in the future. But like we mentioned, even in the prototype video before, we have plans for map generation that should make it easy to make a bunch of different types of maps for the final game.
And in addition to that, we just changed some things with the way that the camera behaves with the car, boat, box with wheels. Made it so that as you get higher off the ground, it'll zoom out so that you can actually see where you're going to land and stuff. So being in the air is slightly more interesting. And we actually kind of put a texture on those waves and used some cool shader effects to make it look like that water's moving.
So initially, I was asked to make just a vehicle, some sort of aquatic vehicle. And at the time I figured, I don't know, I was kind of craving some sort of jet ski for some reason. And I was kind of scoping out some of the Sea-Doos, and I figured, what the heck, I'll put this in there and make it unique. And so that's kind of how we came into the, not necessarily iconic, but not robot jet ski. In addition to that, we added in the waves, which actually went through quite a process. There were a couple of different waves that we went through, even in the early sets, a couple of different styles. Ultimately, though, we ended up, at the time, we stuck with the one that had the kind of light refracted through it, which ended up looking a little strange with the movement patterns. But outside of that, we added in the character, which was an entertaining little bit of modeling, I guess you would say. Or originally, we ended up leaving him bald, so that way you could just put any sort of cosmetics onto the character that you wanted in terms of hair, beards, or really anything, clothing in general. Plus, I mean, it was easier. But in addition to that, we kind of toyed around with the posing. I think originally when I made him, he was standing up, and then we went through some processes of kind of fitting him to the bike that was a little bit entertaining, and then eventually moved into a system where he actually has joints. Outside of that, we did a lot of, I mean, just like general like sky backgrounds and some backgrounds for behind the water. And the coins. We added the coins. We had the initial, we were running off of the gas idea, so we had to do the gas tank icons, which went through some issues because originally it was too small and didn't read very well, and then had to play with the colors a little bit. It was an interesting kind of a learning experience because I hadn't really worked too much on Android resolutions or iPhone resolutions for that matter. Kind of a nice little break.
I think the biggest thing with the art assets that we iterated on was just saturation of colors and then the contrast ratios of highlights and actual body colors of things.
Yep. And then there was the title screen, which originally started as my kind of like my demo for the art style, and then just kind of kept getting toyed with and tweaked with until we found a use for it outside of just demoing the graphics, and turned it into a title screen, which worked out pretty well for us, I would imagine.
So Corey just mentioned a lot of the art assets we made for the game, and I think next we should probably talk about how we decided on the art style for making those assets. So one of the first things we kind of decided on was that we didn't want to make a game that required too much super high fidelity graphics. We wanted to make something that was relatively easy to make, but still stylistic and, aesthetically pleasing. So me and Corey kind of worked together to develop this art style you've seen right now.
Originally, I was asked to do, just kind of brainstorm a couple of different styles. I had gone through a few, just kind of toying around with them in sketches, and then a couple in digital painting. I did my initial one that I was kind of gearing towards was actually kind of more of a Japanese brushstroke style, which I kind of played around with for a while, but then I realized that you couldn't really push the detail in vehicles as well because you had these bold, kind of almost kanji-like brushstrokes on everything. And that was pretty much the main decider on deciding to go against. But I had played around with that for a little while, and then I had also was on the side kind of toying around with this sort of arts and crafts craft paper style that had kind of almost like a craft paper texture to it, but it had that kind of like warm nostalgia to it from like the kindergarten days when you put together your own little 5-finger turkeys and whatever. I felt like that might hit well with a lot of people. It might kind of feel welcoming. And then in addition to that, I mean, it kind of made everything really unique because I personally in my research didn't see a whole lot of games that pushed any sort of kind of crafts papery look outside of like some Kirby games and stuff, which who doesn't like Kirby games?
Plus kindergartners are our target demographic. We're really hoping that they open their wallets. So that was a big influence for our art decision.
Yeah, so if you know rich kindergartners, please pass this game along. Now would also probably be a good idea or a good time to mention that Corey put together an art style guide for us, and it's important to recognize that your art style is probably going to evolve over time. But putting together a style guide can help guide other team members as they join. And so when we had other people join, it was really handy. And you can see the art guide at notrobot.co/blog/art guide. I don't know if that's the website.
We can always edit the actual URL in later.
Yeah, we will put a link to that in the bottom half of the video that you can click on and go straight to it.
Yes.
In addition to that, it also kind of helps for all of you guys when you're making suggestions or you have ideas that you want to see if you can incorporate in. It gives you kind of a better baseline to kind of mold those ideas and push them my way.
Cool. So next, let's talk about some of the big technical decisions that we had made or were challenges that for us at this point. And I really don't know what they were, so this is going to be all you, Derek and Ryan.
I actually don't either, so
So
if you could recap.
at this point,
I actually don't remember either.
all right, well, at this point, we were pretty much completely tied to all of the platforms that we had discussed in the prototype video. So we were stuck, well, I say stuck, but committed to is a better way of saying it. The Adobe Air platform using the Starling framework with Citrus as kind of our game engine, complete with Nape API for the physics. So we're pretty much committed to all of those things. At this point, we didn't have a whole lot of technical decisions to make. It was mainly just kind of figuring out how to achieve what we wanted to with decent frame rate within the constraints of all of the things that we had already committed to.
Yeah, I mean, this was mainly an implementation stage and not necessarily like a deep architectural thought type of time.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I mean, for the alpha, the only things that we did, like we slightly iterated on the physics and tweaked those a little bit, got it behaving slightly more boat-like. There was a first kind of, leading into getting the waves to where we wanted them to be, with figuring out how to use Starling and make our own custom objects, and render it directly using VBOs, IBOs, and custom shaders on all the pixels and stuff.
Yeah, so this is when we started to incorporate UI that would wrap around our core loop of the game as well. And we probably mentioned it in the prototype video last time, but we decided to go with Feathers, which is kind of the default Starling UI design kit. And so this is kind of our first foray into using it.
It's beautiful.
Did we actually look at other UI implementations or things, or did we just jump right on Feathers because we knew, the same guys there?
Yep, basically. I mean, Feathers is the go-to. Like, Adobe supports Starling, Feathers, Phlox, these things as the default environment.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Phlox just then, because we kind of knew at this point that we were going to want to collect a lot of stats and have high scores and these types of things eventually in the game. And we looked around at a lot of different kind of back-end services that we could use to just kind of report data to and then have that third party track everything for us. We decided that we would use Phlox for this, which is a really great back-end. As I said before, it tracks any stats that you want, can track users, and it has really great support for leaderboards.
Basically, Phlox gave us a really simple out-of-the-box solution for our first level of keeping track of.
Yeah, I mean, it was mainly for leaderboards at this point. We didn't need a persistent layer for, anything else.
Cool. So next we're going to kind of talk about our feedback we received from showing off the alpha, and then also what went right and wrong in general with it, based on those responses and just based on our own experiences. So first, the things that went right. In general, people from across all ages, pretty much everybody liked the game at this point. Whenever you show someone something that you make, they're always going to tell you it's great, but you can kind of read between the lines by watching how they interact with it. And, my mom took the frickin' phone and just disappeared and played for a really long period of time and kept wanting to play more and more, and she doesn't I shouldn't probably say how she can barely turn on her iPhone, in case she ever watches this. But if someone mutes her iPhone for her, she misses calls for a week or two. But she liked it, so that was a pretty good sign.
So this is kind of the first time that we put the game in front of people that weren't necessarily our friends and family as well. And you might be able to learn something from our strategy, but we started looking at like websites, forums that we could submit to get feedback. And probably the place that was most successful, and maybe even the only one that we tried initially, was just the Reddit gaming dev community.
Feedback Friday.
Feedback Friday. So yeah, so we posted our game on Feedback Friday, and it was an awesome feedback, and just people that same boat as us. They're making games, some of them for the first time, some of them have made before, and everyone just like reviews each other's games and gives feedback. And so we got some really good feedback from people that we didn't even know, and that's definitely motivating as far as continuing your project forward. And also at this point, this was kind of a proving time for us as a company, because this is the first big milestone that we set, where we want to have this game in front of people that are not just ourselves and see what they say. And so this was kind of our first, you could call it a crunch time. It was really a week of crunch time leading up to getting this release out.
And also the week before Christmas. None of us wanted to work too hard over Christmas.
Yep. So yeah, it was really fun, and it's a good time for your team to gel together too and come together and accomplish the goal.
Yeah, so there was not a single person that I put this game in front of that didn't enjoy it on some level. I mean, everybody had a different experience. I noticed that people had drastically different strategies when playing it. Some tried to do tricks, some tried to collect every single coin on the thing, and that's kind of exactly what we wanted. So it was kind of an overwhelming experience to get that much positive feedback.
Yeah, it was, I would say, pretty successful at that phase. But that being said, there were still a couple things that didn't go according to plan. And one of the big things that we have kind of been fighting with so far, and this is where it really became clear, that our controls were not very intuitive, and that the left arrow very clearly went left, the right arrow very clearly went right, but people were confused about which direction they'd be spinning in the air. The funny thing is we actually had the prototype set to one orientation, and half the people thought it was fine, the other half were like, whoa, why is everything backwards? So then we set the prototype to the opposite, and then half the people were, the original half were now upset, and the other half were like, hey. So the lesson to learn isn't that you can make everybody happy with one option, but the lesson to be learned, I think, is that you need to figure out the differing playstyles and make sure that you're hitting, the ones that are important for you. So we know that we knew that we needed to change the look of the UI a little bit to make sure that it was going to be clear which direction you'd be spinning. But the thing we specifically did now after the alpha is that we made it very easy to invert the controls, and we made it a priority to always keep it really easy to invert the controls. The other part of what went wrong is that, actually, Corey, you want to talk about this a little bit?
Well, for starters, we had to make some changes to the buttons, because people were getting confused about rotation and physics in the air.
Really, like, nothing about those waves fit with anything else.
Yeah. I mean, in general, the waves needed to change because the kind of like marbling that was done to simulate light in the water just didn't mesh well with the movement, the shader movement. And ultimately made people feel like, at times, it made people feel like they were moving a lot faster than they were. And then at other times, I actually had a few friends that at one point had stopped moving and didn't realize it. I realize that sounds ridiculous, but it happened. And so ultimately, we kind of had to toy around with that. We ended up moving towards a much more cohesive art style for the waves, which I think was a way better decision.
All right, so that's pretty much the feedback and kind of the thoughts that were going on in our head as we were showing the game off in alpha. And now we're going to talk about what our priorities were moving forward, towards the beta, basically. So number one was improving the basic mechanics. We'd already kind of started focusing them down, but we wanted to make sure that the tricks, we had actually registering tricks. So if you were spinning in the air, you were going to get rewarded for it. We wanted to make sure that the gas and the checkpoints actually worked as intended. Right now, they're completely random, so the only chance of you running out of gas was if the random number generator just completely hosed you. And you could get rich, completely randomly. There was no coin growth throughout the course of the game, for example. So making sure that those mechanics we already found were fun and that worked were really implemented perfectly.
And we know going forward that in order to wrap this whole game and make it interesting for everyone playing, that we need to be able to add all kinds of things like extra vehicles, cosmetic items, different maps. And so we're going to need a menu system that's both beautiful and intuitive for people to select these things and move from one play session to the next.
So for the technical things that we knew we needed to do, from here, we knew that we were going to use Phlox for a persistence layer on storing, which vehicles you had purchased and those types of things, what, level you were on, as well as the leaderboards and other things. But in addition to that, we'd had a lot of plans for taking the rider and making it so that instead of being stuck on the vehicle, he would actually be physics-based, full ragdoll type stuff, and we knew we wanted him to be able to pop off and kind of flop around and splash in the water, kind of make dying a lot more interesting and kind of fun.
So level generation, we want to get better so that there's many different varying types of levels that you can play, and we will detail the way we set up our biome system in one of our next videos.
Oh, cliffhanger.
Well, at the end of showing it to people, we realized that we were going to need to add in a couple more things, obviously, to make the scene a little bit more populated and a little bit more engaging. We decided that obviously we'd need some clouds for the sky. In addition to that, we knew we were going to have to put in some sort of background layers and midground layers to kind of build that parallax between the foreground wave and the coastline and the horizon.
Hashtag make it pop.
I want that to be a thing. But initially we were going to have, I believe, 4 different styles, and then that ended up evolving into quite a different thing. But in addition to that, we had toyed around with the idea of having multiple waves and also potential objects kind of floating in the midground. Just like statues and different things like that, just to kind of build a world, if you will, and kind of also still push that parallax. And then in addition to that, we had to make some UI adjustments to kind of better fit user experience and kind of push general gameplay mechanics directly to the player. And in addition to that, we kind of knew that we weren't going to be able to keep the bright orange buttons because that doesn't really fit. So we had to think about what kind of a UI theme we wanted to use and how it would mesh with our game, and just in general kind of make it pop.
Hashtag make it pop.
I like how it sounds like the side effects to something. Hashtag make it pop.
So I think the last thing that we knew we needed moving forward was to actually kind of get real sound effects that would fit the game and were cohesive across each other and stuff, as well as some proper music to go with it.
Yeah, so like Brian said, we knew we were going to need to get our own sounds or legally acquired sounds in some way. That's what Wave Crash looked like at the alpha stage. Hopefully you've kind of learned what our process looks like, and if you're interested and you haven't already, go ahead and watch our prototype video, and soon we will be also posting our beta as well, hopefully. Banter!
Yeah, so thanks for listening all the way through, and we hope you're getting as excited about the development of this game as we are. This is kind of our first time doing this, so feel free to give us any feedback. We'd love to make these videos more useful to you if you can just tell us what you want to know. And thanks for sticking with us, and we hope you check out our website and just ask us what's up. We'd love to know what you're doing too.
And we just we'd like everyone to remember that we are not robots, and we are not in any way controlled by robots. And in fact, there are no robots anywhere.
Yeah, actually suggesting we're controlled by robots has been made illegal.
Hashtag make it pop.